Okay, I think you've waited all long enough for the review of the Lenovo P2, but I have to get a few things out first. This review will most probably be very long, and at some point it could turn out a little bit of a rambling, but I just wanna cover everything here once again. Just in case you have maybe seen the first impressions video, the very extended one, 8 days ago, you already know pretty much what to expect here, and nothing has really changed because what I've seen 2 hours after using the device pretty much has confirmed what I thought, and now 8 days ago I know it even better, but not really anything has changed. And I wanted to take the time because I think this device, especially for me, is very important. So that's why I want to take the time to cover everything once again, and I'm going to say one thing once again without any teasing or so. For me, it is my most favorite phone of 2016. Not saying it is the best one, because if I would say this is the best phone of 2016, I would have to end the sentence with if. And then if the camera is not the most important part for you. And of course there are a lot of different things because it's definitely far from perfect. But it perfectly fits my needs, especially what I want from a phone. But you will see that throughout the review. So let's get to the design and build quality. I've already said in the first impressions video and nothing has changed. Yes, obviously with 177 grams it is a little bit heavier and it is a little bit bulky since it's not a thinnest one, but it has the big battery, and considering that 5100 mAh battery, I have to actually say it's quite easy to manage. It's not really bulky, it's quite compact in my opinion. Yes, we have the black border around, which you don't really see all that much. As you can see, it's a really tiny one actually. I'm not the biggest fan of the golden border, but yeah, that's another thing. But I have to say it lies right in the hand because of this really nice curve here. And it looks nice with the beveled edges, as you can see that. So it's definitely elegant. In terms of build quality, nothing to complain. Because as you can see here, super solid. This doesn't bend at all. It doesn't feel hollow. Really great in terms of build quality. And if we go around it, check the design. Here we have the LEDs, the camera. Here we have, of course, the antenna bands and the headphone jack. SIM card and SD card tray. We have here the ultra power saving mode, not really something that interesting though. Here we have the speaker, fake speaker cutouts with the microphone, and micro USB, which is actually surprising because I expected to have USB Type-C when I wanted to charge it actually the first time. Here with the power button, in my opinion, absolutely in the perfect position for me to easily reach it. Same with the volume rocker, and they have a nice tactile and audio feedback, so I definitely like that. We have a notification LED. We don't have capacitive button, but we have the power button, and I want to get into that first because I personally would say this is my favorite fingerprint reader of them all, because as you can see there is not really any delay and it just works so great. You don't have to press it, you just have to tap on it, and it works so reliable with all my fingers so fast. And this is the most convenient one, and actually the one that I've actually sometimes not even trusted that it works, because as you can see it does actually notice that it's not working, because sometimes I thought it just turns on the display without even checking the fingerprint reader, but it does. And this is just something that I'm amazed by. What I wanted to quickly address, as you can see here, in my opinion, my device, if the camera will be able to grab that, is flat. And yes, it has trouble, I totally get that. As you can see, this is flat in my opinion. Someone pointed out that he saw another review where it seemed like it would have been a curved edition or a curved version. I can't see that at all because it feels very curved off, but the display itself is flat, but due to the whole roundness of the device, it lies great in the hand. Build quality is amazing. And that is where I want to leave it before we are now going to talk about the display, because I've said it already on the Moto Z Player, and I would say this is exactly the same display. I think they just used the same panel here, which is absolutely fine in my opinion. But I just have to point out that, for example, here in the display settings, we have the color mode a little bit limited. We have normal if you want it more realistic, but I definitely prefer vibrant. And then if we check the display, oops, let's go. No. Of course, this had to happen. I have to say it is a really high quality display, and I will call it really good. And in my opinion, really good is actually above very good, because it's such a nice, pleasant display. Yes, it's maybe not super high res, but I don't care, because I only noticed it not being crazy sharp when I went back to my Samsung Galaxy S7, but the colors are absolutely great because not crazy oversaturated. And if you don't want to just use the standard mode, the viewing angles are super stable. It's a very bright panel. I used it with 30%, which is actually really good for an AMOLED display. The blacks, of course, are pitch black. The white point is, in my opinion, really nicely set because it doesn't feel too warm at all. And overall, this is a really good display. It's maybe not quite flagship, but it's totally more than good enough. And after all, we have to consider this is not a flagship phone without the flagship price, and therefore even more so respectable. So let's check the sound. About the speaker. First of all, one thing that I've just noticed is you have to cup it to get the best possible sound. Otherwise, it sounded not flat, but a little bit harsh in terms of highs. But overall, especially in general, is a sound, especially if cupped. The sound is actually very warm and very full and rich, something that I personally like. Then, of course, the maximum volume is absolutely also there. Maybe not always that audible on the microphone, but it definitely is very loud and it is very full and rich. So I would call this definitely a very good speaker. Of course, it's not better than something like a front-facing speaker, but just compared to something like the Moto Z Play, which is very similar, it sounded a little bit fuller actually. Of course, that one had a front-facing one, which maybe has some benefits, but I was fully pleased. One thing to point out is that on the maximum volume, sometimes it tended to distort just ever so slightly, but if you just go one notch down, you will be still way more than loud enough and still sounds great. One thing where I have to say though, where I was wrong in my first impressions video, I assumed it would be the same headphone jack quality as on the Moto Z Play, which I found to be very good. Not the case here. This is just average, pretty much as on all other phones, and I've pointed out that I will point this out on every other device, and I have to point this out here. I am disappointed. I wanted more, and I wished and I hoped for it to be the Moto Z Play headphone jack. Unfortunately, it's not. So, performance. Now, let's end all the apps. And let's see what we get in terms of launch times. As you can maybe see, of course, don't mind really the slight red hue. This is due to the camera, and the flickering, of course, is something you won't really see in reality. So as you can see, apps maybe don't launch crazy fast. But what in my opinion is actually way more important these days is that we have consistent performance and consistent smooth performance. Because the little bit of a slightly slower start doesn't affect the overall experience at all. And for example, one thing that I like, as you can see here, my gestures work absolutely fine. They are quick enough and it never felt slow at all. And then it is just the smoothness due to the higher or perceived frame rates or refresh rates of the AMOLED panel. Super nice and smooth, and this on a super high consistent level. And I've already called the Moto Z Play a pretty much flagship level performer, and I'm calling this the same. Even though I have to say, the Moto Z Play, if my mind didn't play tricks with me, felt like it had a little bit less of, or pretty much none at all, of those tiny little stutters or lags. So this is really rare here. Absolutely. As you can see here, everything runs nice. Of course, Google Plus never runs really all that great. But it is on such a high level that maybe besides the just ever so slightly slower performance, which is something that no one in this price range will ever care about, for me it is a flagship experience in terms of performance, and that is what important, because as you can see here, of course, we also have 4 GB of RAM in my first impressions video. I actually said 3 GB, and of course this is not due to reloading. Okay, no, so don't you think that it had to reload. This is just a blank page, so there was nothing to show. But as you can see here, with 4 GB of RAM, this doesn't struggle at all with multitasking, and it was really great. Actually, yeah, nothing really else. It is, don't get me wrong here, and I just want to make this clear. For me, it's a flagship experience, even though it's maybe just 90-95% of a flagship performance, but it is so close that I don't bother at all. And I have to actually say, if someone would ask me honestly, which performs in daily use better, your Samsung Galaxy S7 or the Lenovo P2, I would say this, because yes, there are some apps that run even smoother on the S7, but not as consistent, not in general like this one, and that's great. Of course, games run a little bit less than on some flagships. After all, it's just a Snapdragon 625 and the GPU isn't all that fast, but I have to say we have constant, quite moderate frame rates at about 25 to 30 frames with pretty much no frame drops, no really breakdowns or anything like that, so it's overall playable at all times. Now, as you can already see, my Bluetooth controller didn't work, so I think something is really wrong with them, because lately I didn't get it to work. But the gaming is absolutely fine. It doesn't heat up at all, which is also very nice to see, because especially with the really efficient battery and CPU, you can play with this device for hours and hours, and that is very important, because what's the best game worth it if you can play it for long enough? And this is on a really good level here without any heat or something like that, and I have to just give it to that. And now maybe the next most important part, actually the absolute highlight here, as you can see, the battery life. 2 hours for a full charge. Doesn't sound all that fast, but considering this is a 5100 milliamp hour battery, that is fast, believe me. And especially, as you can see, just half an hour for 48%. And those 48% for many people are easily enough for even 2 days of use. As you can see here, this is one of the best values. This is the best value I've ever seen. 5% for 1 hour of YouTube. And of course, an AMOLED is always very efficient here. Now, let me try to break down the battery stats. And I have a little bit of a hard time, because I've used it for 8 days, but I've only used it on 2 charges. The first initial one with the heavy setup process and everything, which was still on Wi-Fi, on airplane mode. I just have to mention that. And there I managed to use it 5 full days with a little bit over 16 hours of screen on time. And of course, now a lot of people could say this was an airplane mode. What's the real life use? Real life use, I have to though mention 30% of brightness, which is absolutely bright enough for me. Maybe not always outdoors, but usually. And with about, I would say, 20-25% of mobile data. The rest was just on Wi-Fi because I wasn't at work and so on. So I don't have the quite same conditions like I usually have on my reviews. But what I got is 3 full days. So 72 hours with 14.5 hours of screen on time. And even though I can't maybe give you some more detailed stats on how much it performs on Wi-Fi only, on data only, and a mixed use, I think it's obvious this device will hold long enough no matter what you do, because what I've usually seen people answering in the first impressions video was like 12 hours over the course of 2 or 3 days in mixed use, and I definitely don't doubt that. And you can see amazing, and I will call it later on the pros and cons Insanity Pro plus battery life, because that's just what it is in my opinion. So if the camera would have switched, we can talk about the software. Lock screen, nothing really special here, and let's talk about one thing first, the buttons. Because as you have maybe already seen in my first impressions video, there is something special about it here. Because on the Moto Z Play, the fingerprint reader was just a fingerprint reader. It's more than that just here, because I can easily, and especially a lot of people don't like that on AMOLED displays because you will get some burn-in of the buttons. You can just hide them and you will never have to use them again, because you can do everything with just this one button. Because, for example, let's get into that so I can show this, and I will take my time for it just because I think it's worth it. If you go into system buttons, you can see you can hide the navigation bar. You can change also the button behavior here, because as you have seen, I have the back on the right side. And this is very important, turn on fingerprint device gestures. This means if you just tap it without pressing, it is back. If you press it, it is home. And if you long press it, which takes a little bit longer than you would hit if you would have hit the button, but this is the recent apps button. And this, in my opinion, works so great. And that's why I pretty much only use that, because it's so convenient. I usually just use the home button and the back button. I don't really use that recent apps button so often. So that's why it's really great in that regard, and nothing else to add here. Now, let me go into really quick the home so I can show the Lenovo launcher. Nothing really spectacular here, because a lot of people always complain about me not using that, but I've used it for like 1 or 2 days. And as you can see, it's pretty much a stock launcher. Nothing really special to show here. And now the next thing we have, of course, quick settings. You can rearrange them. Nothing out of the ordinary, just so you can see that here. Pretty standard cost. What I actually like to see is the theme center. And one thing that has to be pointed out, that we actually can change something that I did not expect to be changed. Because as you can see here, the recent apps. A lot of people don't like this. This is very similar to something like maybe iOS or maybe like EMUI. Absolutely no problem, because as you have actually seen, and I didn't know that back then, you can easily change that to the normal Android behavior. And then you have the stock cards. Of course, you can change here in the theme center, the call, the dial as well, the backgrounds. The lock screens can be changed, as you can see here. You can change the layout. So this is actually usually then more customization, but it doesn't really impact so much. Besides, for example, the certain look, it doesn't really change anything here or in the quick settings. I would have wished the theming engine to change a few more things than just that, because it still maintains the stock Android look, which is something that I would have actually liked to have seen changed. Notification center, for example, you can change, of course, the quick settings and so on. You have this. This is nothing all that special in features. We have quick snap. I've already showed this, and it will be very repetitive compared to my first impressions, but I still wanna get this done. Double press, of course. We have knock onto the light, micro screen, wide touch. I've already showed that as well, because this is the button here. If you press that double, it will open up, and you can see you could now set some favorite buttons here and some stuff, but I didn't set that up. But you can change, of course, the transparency and so on. And this kind of actually mimics the whole layout of the buttons here, because if you would just press it once, it is back. So this is a floating button. If maybe one and use is a little bit harder for you. So I definitely like that feature a lot. Other than that, not trying to make this review too long though. What else is there to show off? We have the VR switch mode, dual app profile, because you could use 2 instances on one app, high sensitivity touch. What else? And the notifications that we already had it in display mode and so on. Nothing really. We have LED notification, actually something that is nice, because you can change the color of the LED for whatever you have it. For example, text message, unread message, and so on. And in the sound, I think there is something like an audio wizard, but I'm at the moment not quite exactly sure. I don't think actually. So there is a lot that I like about the software. I definitely prefer it actually over the Moto software. Of course, we don't have the gestures here, and we don't have Moto display or Moto voice or something, which is a little bit, yeah, something that would have been maybe nice, but it is what it is. And just to quickly show off that button once again, what it does is, if you switch it on, it goes into the ultimate power saving mode, and here you only have, as you can see, a few buttons left, because you can pretty much just use the calculator or the calendar, clock, SMS, because this is to preserve the most amount of battery. I don't think it's really necessary, because therefore the battery life on its own is already that great, and you have seen the software is quite capable, especially the feature with the button is something that I really like a lot. Now, I have been asked about updates, and this is something that I want to quickly address. Someone said, now that Moto is part of Lenovo, maybe Moto devices will get the updates earlier instead of the Lenovo device, but in my opinion, that doesn't make much sense, and I asked my Lenovo contact, and he said pretty much the same, because Lenovo owns Moto now. What would they have of that if they would have given Moto the early updates? It would make more sense to support their Lenovo devices at least the same amount, if not even better. Of course, I can't really say that so much, because back then Moto could offer early updates for one reason, because they didn't have many devices. Now Lenovo, including Moto, has a lot more devices to cover, and that's why updates could take a little bit longer. But as the system is for right now, it's already super great. Once it gets nougat, it will be just crazy amazing if they keep all the features and get with nothing away. But you get it. I'm pretty impressed by the software. Okay, let's talk about the one thing that I have just to point out not being that great, the camera, because as you can see here, this does not look all that impressive. And here actually, as you can see here, it manages some decent shots. Don't really ever expect anything great. They are okay. Even in low light, actually indoors, quite fine. It doesn't really get any worse, because as you can see, this is actually a solid shot. But yeah, it's definitely not a great camera in overall. And we'll see this here once again here with the flash and without the flash. So this gets very dark, very grainy, very blurry, not really impressive. And I can't really deny it, because a lot of people have asked me, is it a deal breaker? For me, it's not, but just because the camera isn't important. So I would get it if it is a problem for you. I personally think it's still good enough, but it's definitely disappointing, especially since you consider that the whole rest of the phone offers so much. Because as you can see here, just have a little bit of a slight shake and it's not great, and this is okay. But you can actually get some nice shots, like for example this one. And once again here, if you check the other pictures, one thing that I have to point out, because I actually redid the whole shooting today, even though I did not include the pictures here, to see if the camera will maybe perform a little bit better in better lighting situations, because even today I didn't have the best one, but better ones than right now on this shoot. But still, it didn't change much. And one thing that I definitely noticed once again is the fact that the autofocus is very flaky and had very trouble. Sometimes I had to like 10 times tap, and as you can see here, this is a mess. I had to tap like 10 times to get the shot right, but sometimes, as you can see here, it gets a decent shot. I would say it's never really more than good or decent. I just didn't see any of those pictures, and it's a little bit disappointing. It was already on a very similar level like that on the Moto Z Play, so also quite disappointing. And I've seen cameras even 1 or 2 levels lower that produced better shots, and not quite sure what to say here. So if you check the video now, and I just left this on purpose here because it's definitely not a great shot and you will see something. The very hunting autofocus, it jumps all the time, it's very nervous, and you would see this all the time because of course, as you can see, the weather is very bad, and with better situations it could have been better, but it is just not the case. But actually the autofocus is reliable, it's okay. For pictures, like I said, not always. And today, when I had better lighting situations, it didn't really make a whole lot of a difference. Of course, shaky footage, we don't really have any real optical image stabilization or some proper stabilization at all. And here you can see this slowdown, and I left it in on purpose because even though this video is in 4K, it is not a problem of 4K because it did it at the exact same point, the exact same slowdown on 1080p. So I'm not quite sure why, but usually it was actually fine. But I wanted to show this one. But as you can see, it manages actually quite okay, at least smooth video, and the video is not that bad. Of course, it's not 4K sharp as it should be, same as a 1080p isn't, but it's in some way a better video camera than it is a photo camera. But I have to just say I'm still disappointed, and I would say let's leave it like it is. The camera could have been better. It's not enough to be a deal breaker for me yet, but a lot of people were concerned about it, and if the camera, like I will say in my conclusion, is very important to you, then it's not the right phone for you, obviously. But if you just want a halfway decent picture of something, it gets the job done. Now, pros and cons. Very good build quality. I can't say anything else. It feels very solid, doesn't creak, feels actually nice in the hand, and for its size with the big battery, actually relatively compact. My favorite fingerprint reader so far. This is like I wouldn't use one at all. So this is great, and the display turns actually quite fast now, which is great. A very good speaker, a really good display. I forgot that. Really good means better than very good. For me, flagship level. Of course, not as high res, but I don't really care. The experience was great. Same as for the speaker. Very loud, very warm, very rich. Top. Almost flagship performance. Like I said, almost, because it's not quite there on the Moto Z Play. If it would have been exactly like on the Moto Z Play, I would have said flagship performance. But this one, I just noticed a minor few quirks here and there, but really, occasionally, really rare, and still pretty much flagship experience, and that is what counts to me. Insanity Pro Plus battery life, I've already talked about that in length. Great software, especially the enhancements. I like the additions of the theming engine, even though it's there. We can change the buttons and the fingerprint button, because the smart use of the home button, I really enjoy that, because I don't get why don't more they do this, especially on the AMOLED display, because you don't have to have the fear about burning. And then great value, because I'm a little bit hard because I can't really tell the pricing here in the US, so I just have to assume something at around 300, 350 once it's available. Now, let's get into the negatives, because after all, there are a few, not that they are really all that important maybe. Slightly heavier after all, because I've noticed if you have it for longer in your hands, it can get a little bit fatiguing with 170 grams, but it's fine. Slightly bigger buttons. Okay, let me quickly show this. As you can hear, the buttons have a little bit of a gap. It's minimal, but someone said that his one rattles like a snake. Personally, I noticed it, and I said this in my first impressions video, but in normal use, not a problem. No super high-res display, in brackets, because I don't really care. YouTube audio sync bug. This is something that I can't really show off, especially not on the camera, because it has to be really perfectly in sync. What I've noticed, that the video and the audio on YouTube isn't in sync. I've seen this most noticeably on my own videos, but on some other ones as well. I asked on Twitter if that is a common thing. A few people that own this phone for a few or a month now or something like that did never notice it. But after I asked them, they actually said that they've seen it and that they've checked forums, and they say the same. So it is seemingly a common issue, but I think it could be easily fixed, and it's such a slight delay in most other videos that you won't really notice it, and I just noticed it on my video because there it seems to have a little bit more of a delay. Nothing really big, but it's noticeable, worth mentioning. No Moto Z Play headphone jack, like I said, not the greatest one, just average. Speaker slightly distorted on maximum volume, which is in some way not even a negative, because yes, it slightly distorts on lower quality audio, but just go one notch down and it will be gone, and still great. Now, the next thing, theme engine UI changes limited. Like I said, it doesn't really change all that much. It changes the recent UI, the recent apps UI, which is actually quite nice to see. It changes the lock screen a little bit, even though I wouldn't change that, and the icons. But it doesn't really change the overall design, which is something that I would have just wished to have seen. And then the disappointing camera, which actually is the one real big flaw for me. If it's big enough for you, is something you have to decide. Now, what I want to take now into consideration is the competition here, because that's why I want to take a little bit more time for that, just to cover everything. What is the competition here in this price range? Now, of course, the first obvious one is the other Snapdragon 625 phones. And I can tell you, forget all about these, because there is the Huawei Nova Plus, Huawei Nova, and the Lenovo Zenfone 3. These are the ones that I reviewed. This one is superior to all of them, not just in terms of performance, where it is noticeably better, but all the rest is just better, besides maybe the camera, and also even battery life is better and so on. The one actually very close, 625 of course, is the Moto Z Play. Like I said, the better audio. The camera, not really, pretty much the same. Software, I actually prefer the one on the Lenovo. The feel in the hand is here so much better. Battery life is even better. Speaker is in some way better, but on the same part, display is the same. So, not a real difference, but for me, it makes a huge difference that the overall inner feel is just so much better. I did not like that on the Moto Z Play, but with this phone being around 320, 330 euros right now, it's actually cheaper than when my first impressions video where it was still 350. But I've seen this phone going away already for like as low as 280. And then I don't see any real worth mentioning competition. It just kills everything. But if you go a little bit higher, if you are maybe willing to pay a little bit more, there are some kind of more towards flagship phones already. There is the OnePlus 3T. There is the X7 and such alike. So these are maybe in terms of performance and display even a little better. The camera is definitely better. Battery life not though. So I have to say the overall package of this one is what makes it to me, and this is what I find to be just so amazing. And that's why I say it's my favorite phone, because it checks all the boxes that I want to be checked. The camera definitely doesn't get checked, but it's not important for me. And now, here's my actual offer towards Lenovo, just in case they listen and wanna go on that. If they send me one to keep it, a gray one, because I'm not a fan of gold, I will do whatever they want with my Samsung Galaxy S7, because yes, I would trade that for it. I thought about smashing it, but what good would that be? So I would, if they want to make a giveaway, but maybe not an international one. That would be just a little bit too expensive for me. But I would replace this phone, or my S7, with this phone, because even though, and this actually means quite a lot, even though I'm not at all a phablet person, and I've said this on pretty much every review, that I don't like phablets. They're just too big for me. I like the one-hand use. But here is why I would do it. First of all, overall qualities are on such a high level that I like it. And then there are just a few things. I don't have to bother about the software because it's so solid. The performance is so consistently smooth. The display is great. The sound is great. It feels actually good in the hand. And I don't have to bother ever about the battery again, because I could maybe just charge this like twice a week. That would be easily good enough. I would go through like 3 or 4 days sometimes with this phone. And this is what, especially for me, would make it worth it. So Lenovo, in case you're listening, yeah, just the offer. But that's it. Video is already super long, really long. I guess I've covered it all. In case I didn't, leave it in the comments. Ask all the questions that I've maybe forgotten something. And this would be it. Just in case, real quick, if you consider to buy the flagships like the X7 and the OnePlus 3T, I would personally go for this, because the benefits of the better display, maybe better sound on the X7 or the better performance on the OnePlus 3, don't make enough of a difference for me to sacrifice it here. I'm so impressed with the battery life and the overall high quality. So yeah, okay. And no, I was not paid to say this. What else? Leave a like, subscribe, and the rest of that. And yeah, not to make it even longer, I would say have a nice day. Bye.